if I could go back and tell myself, if you can't find the perfect person, you're like, I want someone with this ID and stuff like that. It's better, like, look at whatever your insurance provides. It's better to see someone than no one.
Yeah.
Don't let the cost be a barrier because, you'll probably change jobs eventually or something will happen and you can do that. But
Yeah.
We had such a great conversation with Alyssa Leah Marie a few weeks ago about her personal journey becoming a licensed therapist. And it kind of got us thinking about our own personal journeys with therapy. And so for today's episode, we thought we'll kind of share our learnings and how it really impacted us in a positive way.
If you've seen the Netflix hit Beef starring Ali Wong and Steven Yeun, you might remember that iconic line that says, Western therapy doesn't work on Eastern minds. And I remember when I first heard that line, I didn't even blink twice at that. I was like, facts. That is so true. But based on our experience here on this couch, we have each gone through Western therapy, and we are here to say that it can work on Eastern minds like our own. And that is if you find the right person to work with.
yeah. And so today we wanted to take some time to share our personal stories. What led each of us to therapy? What were our experiences? How did we find a therapist? What things worked? Maybe what things like didn't that we would change. And that's what we want to share today because we know that even though we have done a lot of episodes on mental health and therapy, and generally it is becoming much less stigmatized, I think there's always more work to be done. And that's kind of what we are here to do today, is to share with all of you our personal journeys. So let's start by just each of us sharing what led us to therapy.
So for me, I started going to therapy after my first panic attack, I think back in 2017 at my corporate job. And I think after that moment, I went to see my general doctor and she recommended, like, I think maybe you should try out therapy. And so due to her recommendation, I started going to therapy pretty much.
Oh, so you were guided you went to like your family
Primary,
doctor,
yeah.
your primary, and then she was the one that was like, maybe you should see a therapist.
Yeah.
What were the things that you told her you were experiencing?
I just told her about my panic attack, that I do have anxiety.
How did you know it was like a panic attack?
Because I had friends who went through it and I never experienced until that moment. I was like, oh, this is what they were going through. And I got it. And so I think in that moment I was like, oh, I have to go see my doctor now. Because I'm like, this is such a new thing. I feel very like this shouldn't be happening. And then, usually when you go to a doctor, you do the general, like, do you feel depression, anxiety, blah, 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 blah. And I think through to my assessment and my, I guess, like, sharing my experience of the panic attack, she was like, I'm going to recommend you into this therapy thing, but just try it out. Like, just no pressure. She didn't like pressuring me, but I was like, I want to try it for myself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So 2017 was when you first went.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm like, so my first experience was in 2019, and I remember during that period of time, I was like, oh, this is such a taboo thing. Like, it still felt like no one was talking about it.
Yeah.
So for me, it was very difficult to get myself to go to therapy. Did you feel like it was easier because your doctor was like, this is doctor recommended, and you should go?
Yeah, I think so. I think at that point it was like the feeling of a panic attack really scared me that I'm just like, I don't want to experience this again.
Yeah.
How can I prevent that from happening in the future?
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I'll do it. But I could share more about this later, but there was part of me that was like, oh, like when she said you should maybe try out therapy, I remember, like, even though I booked the appointment, leading up to the appointment, my first one, I was thinking like, man, like I don't know if I want people to know quite yet, because I feel kind of like, quote unquote, a crazy person, because I feel like everything that I've seen on TV, you're like, oh, you must need like desperate help, or like you must be like something's really wrong with you for you to go to therapy. So I was kind of like, there's a moment of like, oof, I don't know, like I was nervous.
Yeah, that was the same for me too. And the first time I went, again, was in 2019. And it was for, I would say, a whole host of reasons. But the main thing being that I was, and kind of still am, the type of person that masks my emotions quite well. But I would say back then it was to the point where the things I was masking I masked it scarily well. It's like the anxiety, the sadness, the anger. A lot of that I actually took out on, I would say, like the 5 closest people to me. Like they would feel my unconditional love, but then they would also feel these or sense these random outbursts from me that I felt comfortable enough to kind of like lash out onto them, but it wasn't fair to them. And I think undoubtedly it probably hurt them in some way or form. But mostly I would say I took it out on myself. Like there was a lot of negative self-talk happening. It was quite destructive, and I would say disgusting. These are things that I would never say to a friend, that if a friend were to say to themselves, I would stop them, like full stop. You cannot be saying that to yourself. But I was saying that to myself. And it was debilitating in many ways. I think it got to a point where, you know, sometimes I would just be in my bed, and I feel like there are, you know, we've all experienced this before, where we're in bed and we're in our covers and we're just like, I think I'm just going to cancel plans and like not go out and see friends because I can't get myself to do it. And it is in those moments that you're like, oh, I think I'm
Something's off.
something's a little off, you know. And if that happens much too often, then you're like, okay, I think something, you know, internally needs to be fixed, I guess. But the reason why I started going to therapy, because I feel like that was happening for quite a long period of time, is because I started to get deeper into my relationship with my now husband, then boyfriend at the time. And I knew that we were on the path to an engagement. And I knew that that was in my future. I knew I've always wanted to be a mom. I was like, this is going to be in my future soon. And there was no part of me that wanted to ever seek happiness from my husband or have them be the source of my happiness. And I never wanted to rely on having a child be the reason why I become happy. And that's when I said, you gotta figure this out for yourself, because they are not going to be the ones that are going to like carry this burden for you. So that is actually the reason why I started going to therapy, because I was just, you know, anticipating that the future that I wanted was one where I didn't want to taint with my own troubled mind. So yeah.
Whoa.
So you were similar to Mel. You noticed that something was off, right?
Yeah. I mean, something had been off for a long time. But I think it just, you know, when you carry on with your day to day, it's easy to just kind of brush it under the covers and just, you know, think that it'll fix itself.
Yeah.
I do want to say, because I feel like so far already, I'm just between our two stories, and I'm curious to hear yours. I think we're going for going for different reasons. And I think for me, it's actually very powerful to hear that you've been struggling with this for like years, but there was a moment you're like, I just need to it's hard to how do I say it? It's like, I can only imagine you're like, what was a moment if you're able to bury this for so long to be like, I'm going to take care of this? Because I think for me, there was like a shock, holy shit, what the hell's going wrong with me? I need to think, but if you're able to mask it so well, I think the ability to say, today's the day I want to fix this is really empowering to hear, because that's really hard. You know what I mean? But just wanted to say that.
Yeah, it was super hard. But yeah, how about for you, Jay?
Yeah. I think that was you're right. There was an interesting, a certain event kind of puts you forward, and then, or over time something builds, and then suddenly, for myself, it was, I guess, kind of like a combination of things. I first went to a therapist in 2013.
Oh, wow.
And this was, it was in Orange County. And at this point, I had spent the last 2 or 3 years in what in my mind and perception felt like a mess. And I felt like people around me were probably judging it that way. On the flip side, and at the end, I'm like, it's kind of like welcome to mess in your 20s, where you're moving to city and you're trying different careers. But I think for my personality type and my history of being kind of more by the book of a person, it really, I felt like I was I'm failing at life. All of that kind of coming into what Helen is describing, as you start to feel like, why am I so tired all the time? I'm lethargic. I feel not, great. And then the bigger thing also was that someone very close to me was having a pretty intense mental health episode. And I had initially gone in order to try to learn more, to figure out how I can help them and support them. And then in that session, knew also, I'm like, I know that I am myself not doing that well. And it was kind of having conversations with that woman, then opening up this can of it was a event that happened within that year that caused me to go, but then also realizing and reflecting back on my past that there was just that maybe I was dealing with this for a while. And it wasn't, I had, I think, one session with her, and then I didn't really go for a while because I was like moving around or other things got busy. And I just found myself coming back and then kind of like stopping for a while and then coming back. But that was, yeah, the first time I stepped into an office was in 2013.
Wow. I was actually surprised to hear how early it was. Because I think she would say like 2019 felt taboo, or 2017. 2013 was very more like, I think still very not talked about.
Yeah. And, you know, I didn't have any like real friends that had talked about going to therapy and stuff like that. But I had, you know, in my, I guess like junior high, high school time, people close to me that were like diagnosed with like mental health challenges. And so the idea of it, I had been introduced to. And that's why I was like, okay, let me understand this world, because it's very different medical system wise than like the physical medical system world. And so I think it was a little bit less scary for me in that sense, where I'm like, I think this is the right place I need to be going to figure this out.
I don't know about you, but it feels like a lot of my friends are now getting on that baby train. If you have a friend who is also expecting or have little ones still in diapers, I always recommend Pampers Swaddlers. With Pampers Swaddlers, you can also rest assured that this diaper will prevent up to 100% of leaks, even blowouts. Swaddlers has dual leak guard barriers at the legs to help protect where leaks happen most. And they have a blowout barrier, which is an innovative back pocket built into the diaper to help prevent those messy leaks up the back. Did you know that on average, babies will use up to 8,000 plus diapers before becoming potty trained? That is a lot. That's why Pampers Diaper Stash is the hottest baby gift for 2024. So give a gift to a loved one that says, "We see you and we've got you." Pampers Diaper Stash is an online diaper fund that all parents with little ones will love. You can organize friends and family to contribute to a group gift of an online stockpile that never has to run out. Pampers Diaper Stash is great because it takes the guesswork out of choosing what size and how many diapers to gift. It's so easy to do, and it's the gift that always fits.
When you were searching for a therapist, did you have a certain type of therapist in mind? Did the acronym at the end of their names matter to you? Was there someone specifically that you were looking for? And also, as a second question, did you ever have like a breakup with your therapist to like try and find a better one?
Well, for me, when I first started going, like I said, because I had people close to me experiencing mental health challenges, but this was my first time like seeking help for it. And I actually had a friend from college who was doing his advanced degree in psychology. So I called him up and I talked to him about it, and he kind of helped to educate me the differences between like a PSYD, like a PsyD versus like an MA. So you have people that get doctorate degrees, and then the difference between a psychologist for talk therapy and a psychiatrist, which is someone who actually prescribes medication and goes to like traditional medical school kind of route. So I kind of started there, and because this was my first time, I think I was just looking for someone who had the highest amount of education in that sector, right? Which I've learned after the fact that might not be the best approach depending on what you're looking for. But I sought someone who had a PsyD, and then I was also hoping for someone who had an Asian background so they could understand the cultural context, because my perception of mental health and therapy are so 180 now, right? I think it's like a very Americanized perspective I think I now hold. But 2013, I had, I think growing up in a Chinese household, it's totally natural. It's actually not even like talked about at all. And so I felt like very confused, and I looked at it as if it was like a physical illness. So I'm like, I want the best doctor, but also knowing like this is a foreign field, like finding someone with a cultural understanding that knows the way I'm looking at it, and then female, because I was hoping that I felt always more comfortable talking to a woman about personal things.
I agree.
So originally that's how I saw it, but nowadays I've gone through like different, like I said, I went to the therapist that first time, and then I didn't really do follow-up sessions, and then different periods in my life where I would start to feel either something's off again, I'd go back and do multiple sessions, and usually always looking for female, Asian when possible. Sometimes when it's not possible, just someone who is of like ethnic background. And in Los Angeles, there's a lot of like Armenian and Iranian individuals who have a very like culturally they have similar like familial understanding with East Asian cultures. And also, when I've noticed that the highest level of like degree or training is not always the best, oftentimes maybe how many times they've seen clients. So it's like years of experience, because someone might be fresh from school and they're like the most educated, or they've been like doing research for years but not seeing patients, then it might not be the best fit. Also, sometimes I will go, when I'm going for a diagnosis, maybe I want someone who's like more, like I don't really know what's happening, but I kind of want to figure it out. Or once I already know kind of what's happening and I'm going for like I'm specifically wanting to maintain this and I wanted an accountability buddy, that's when like a counselor, someone who's just clocked more clinical hours could be a really good person.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like I just learned a lot in that.
Same.
In what Janet just shared.
Yeah.
I think for me, when I started looking for a therapist, I wasn't actually as educated as you are now about like, the PsyD. Sorry, I was like side duck.
I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew you
I
were
was like,
thinking that.
I wasn't sure. I remember like obviously like I found like a clinic that took my insurance, and then I was on their bio.
That's a big thing
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
That actually is a big,
What else?
That I was like, insurance is one. And then I just went to their website to like read about the bios of the different like therapists taking new clients and just reading about like their background education. I wanted someone with some formal training at least maybe like a master's degree and that.
I think in order to be any type of counselor, you need a master's.
Yeah.
So
So that's what I learned. But I also was looking for like a female because I wanted to like, I felt more comfortable talking through my issues with someone who I felt like I could relate to. I think back then, to be honest, I wasn't aware of like finding someone the same culture, or when I was looking at the clinic, they didn't have anyone that was Asian or Asian American. So I was like, oh, okay, well then I just chose what I thought was the next best fit for me, which is more, she was older than me, but she was kind of more relative. She was younger too. I wanted to see what she specialized in, whether it's like relationships or like anxiety. So someone that kind of knew how to like work through my symptoms or the things I wanted to work through. That's pretty much it. I was just because it's my first time, I was like, let me just dip my toes in and see.
Yeah.
And I think luckily I never had a therapist breakup because they've all been pretty relatively great for me. For context, I actually had 3 therapists so far, and I just started again, which I'll share more about later. And I think each time I have a new therapist, I think my requirements get tighter because I'm learning more about what I need for myself. The reason why I have 3 is because the second one I went to, she broke up with me technically. Actually, not really. She just left the platform. I was on BetterHelp and she was leaving, and I was like, oh, okay. So then I just find a new therapist, and I found another one which I stuck with. So, and the first one I also left because I left companies. My insurance changed, so that was hard too. So, insurance plays a huge role of who you can actually talk to.
For sure, it does. Oh my goodness,
It's expensive.
There's so
out
much
of pocket.
paperwork involved.
Yeah.
The BTS of therapy.
I know. So I remember the first one, I actually really liked her, and I was like, and I changed companies. I couldn't use her anymore because my insurance changed. I'm like, this sucks. But so just FYI, if you guys are looking for a therapist, just know if you change roles or change companies, your insurance could play a factor. But yeah, that's pretty much like how I looked for my therapist.
I do want to say though, like, if I could go back and tell myself, if you can't find the perfect person, you're like, I want someone with this ID and stuff like that. It's better, like, look at whatever your insurance provides. It's better to see someone than no one.
Yeah.
Don't let the cost be a barrier because, you'll probably change jobs eventually or something will happen and you can do that. But
Yeah, or a lot of times I think these therapists, they can also provide maybe some like stipend or some sort of a discount. So it
sliding
doesn't
scale sometimes. For
sliding scale. Yes. It doesn't hurt to ask. Yeah, but that's a great point to not go just because of the cost. So I was in the same boat as Mel. I think I also had no idea like what I was looking for, who I was looking for. And so when I was seeking a therapist, I kind of just went with the first person that was like, okay, I'll take you. And I think when I first met her, I, in my gut, could tell that she was not going to be the right therapist for me. I could tell. It was just like a first impressions kind of a thing. But at the same time, when I went to therapy, I didn't trust my gut at all. I was like, you don't trust yourself. Why would you trust whatever you're thinking about this person? And this person, has her degrees and she's been doing this for a number of years. So she knows what she's doing. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. So just trust her. She turned out not to be the right for me. So I should have just trusted my gut anyway. And I think the reason why she wasn't the best for me was because she was soft, like kind, but also hard on me at the same time. And perhaps the mixture of the two came off as passive aggressive, almost like, oh, how are you today? Oh, do this. It's kind of just like, oh, are you like, I don't understand what you're trying to be for me. And I think she was probably better equipped for younger people.
That makes sense.
I was going to say patience or our therapists, patients,
Yeah.
clients, yes.
Patients, clients, yeah, sometimes they go.
But the last session that we had together, I kind of just mentioned to her, oh, I think I'm going to switch therapists. And she was completely okay with it. So this is like my therapist breakup story. But I just said, I think I would do better maybe with someone else. She didn't really ask why. She was kind of just like, oh, okay. I think they kind of understand.
Yeah.
And so for those of you out there who, are struggling maybe with your current therapist, like don't feel bad ever about saying you might need to go to a different therapist, because at the end of the day, you're there for you. Like they care about you, yes, but like they care more about you getting better, right? So always make that move. And the second therapist that I had, oh, she was so hard on me. It was like a complete 180. It was like not soft and hard. It was hard. But she was also the person where I learned that with the Kleenex boxes, once you hit the yellow Kleenex, that means that your Kleenex is running out. So I emptied out her Kleenex boxes a lot. I literally the first day I sat on her couch and I didn't say anything because I was like, oh, I'm scared of you. But after like a few sessions, I was able to, every session after that, it was just like tears and tears. And I think all of what I had sort of had been building up kind of just like, lay itself out on the couch, and felt proud of myself for making that switch, because that's when the real work was starting to get done. So yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
When you sat down on the couch for your second therapist, or like your official, or your the one that made you clean out the Kleenex, did you already know in your gut like this is gonna work for me?
I think so.
You knew?
Yeah. I was afraid, but I also could tell that she was going to challenge me to the point where it broke me beyond the wall that the first therapist couldn't get me beyond. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I will say, I think like when you have therapy sessions, it's not to say whether you can measure if it's like working or not, but usually like when you're doing deep work, you're going to do a lot of crying, and it's not the like, it's like the deep, like the stuff that's been in there for a long time. And so oftentimes after a session, you can feel really emotionally exhausted.
Yeah.
And that's normal, but yeah.
That question. What's coming up for you? Bitch. Did you get that question too? What's coming up for you? Like, I don't want to tell you.
That is a question they ask a lot.
They do.
Yeah.
We're taught to compromise a lot of things in our lives. I'm in the middle of an apartment hunt, and there is a lot of compromising going on. Like, do I give up a washer, dryer, and unit for good lighting? Do I want to walk up? Do I want an elevator? Like, a lot of things to consider. The list is endless. However, the one thing I will not compromise on is my health. I will not go to a doctor with low reviews just because they take my insurance, or go to someone I find that is not patient-oriented. I've been in places before where I felt super rushed and not cared for by my primary care doctor, and it sucked. Nope, I'm not doing that anymore. If you're like me and not looking to compromise the quality of your health, you gotta check out ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare highly rated in-network doctors near you and instantly book appointments with them online. We're talking about booking appointments with thousands of top-rated, patient-reviewed doctors and specialists. You can filter specifically for ones who take your insurance, are located near you, and treat almost any condition you're searching for. This is actually the feature I like the most. You can search everything at once through the platform. Before, I would Google search each individual doctor, and it was so time consuming. The typical wait time to see a doctor booked on ZocDoc is between just 24 to 72 hours. That's it. You can even score same-day appointments. Luckily, I found a new doctor, but if I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Go to ZocDoc.com/ABG and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/ABG. ZocDoc.com/ABG.
Have you ever had any cultural tensions come up during sessions? And if so, how did you handle it?
I don't think for me there was like a specific I don't know if it's identified as a cultural tension, but there was one moment with my third therapist. I was at home doing my session online, and being back at home sometimes for me, it's really great, but I was having just some butting head moments with my mom, and I was sharing that situation with my therapist and saying like, yeah, I just, it's kind of tough, like being the eldest daughter. My mom's also the eldest daughter, and I kind of talking through like that dynamic, right, in a Taiwanese or Asian household. And I think I was explaining that, and I think when her response back to me kind of alluded the fact that I just have issues with my mom, and I was like, no, like I don't think it's just like a general thing. It's just like there is these little nuanced things that we have to navigate within our generations and different values that I think being Asian American, just female and daughter and like whatever, that I was trying to share, but I was kind of like, oh no, I think the fact that she was like, oh, you just have issues with like the mom thing. And I was like, I really don't though. Like I just felt kind of like, don't generalize it that way. And so there's moments of that where I think when you don't have like an Asian therapist, they won't understand these little like nuances. So
Also, it depends on how they handle it. Yeah. I think that's where if she said those words, oh, you just have issues with your mom, then it makes.
She didn't say that, but I think the way her response alluding to like there was no like, again, like I use the word nuance, but there was no like enlightenment, like acknowledgement of the nuances of this certain type of family. So I was like, oh, maybe you don't have that experience, or you haven't really encountered that. But I don't know. That was just my personal take on it, and I just noted it. But I still stuck with her because that was just a one small moment, and everything else is okay.
Yeah.
But I was like,
I think same for me. So my past two therapists have been white women, and at first I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be an issue. Like, I don't know if I can let my walls down completely if you don't completely understand me on a cultural level." And there were certain comments that were made, like, "Oh, is it because within an Asian household?" Asian households usually value high achievement and success or academics. And I was like, don't generalize my culture. That was like the initial thought that I had. But then when I was able to sort of like reel it back, and I was like, oh, I guess within my household, that is true. That you are right. Like shit. So those are some of the moments where, again, like the generalization or, just kind of making these assumptions. I'm like, but you don't know for sure. And they're like, well, based on other, patients, this is what I understand. And I would kind of challenge them. But at the end of the day, like they were speaking truth to my experience. And I will say that after that point, also are those moments, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that after my therapy like session or stint, I feel like I did come out of it a much better person, and I got what I wanted out of therapy, even though my therapists weren't Asian. So for me, I would say it didn't matter. But there were small moments where I was like, yeah.
I feel you on that.
Yeah.
How about for you, Janet?
For me, when I first started seeing a therapist multiple times and doing like more intensive work, it was someone who was not Asian, but she had a Iranian background. And so when she would say things like, oh, I think from my understanding in Asian household or in like East Asian households, this is the thing. I knew she was coming from a place of like, she said, in my culture, it's similar or it's like a little bit different in this way. And so I found myself more easily like, okay, being open to it. And then I would try to educate her a little bit more about how specifically it happened in my home, right? So I think there is a little bit of just like, being open to sharing that with them, but then also maybe your therapist, if they're not of your culture, being able to ask like, have you seen other patients of my culture? Because there are like just kind of like patterns that they'll see, and then in getting more specific. But yeah, I will say that most of the time it was just finding someone who, if it's not an exact match, a bit of a match. I also this one time had a Korean male, and I thought like Asian would understand, and it was not a good match. I attributed that a little bit to more like the gender maybe, but so yeah, I don't know. So culture sometimes isn't always like the more important understanding. I think it is someone who is able to be open-minded to hearing what you have to say, and then also that you feel safe and open-minded to receive what they're saying.
That's really good insight, actually.
But yeah, I guess the original question about like having a breakup, I have had some where I just switch, and sometimes it's like because insurance changes or something. But I think I've also had the conversation of, I think we're at a good place where I can take some time off, or maybe this isn't the best match. And I would say that's okay, because when you're looking for a therapist to find one, not everyone's going to accept you. Like sometimes they don't take on clients if they don't feel like they have a good chance of helping you. Perhaps like they don't specialize in your thing. So in that respect, it's kind of like dating. So you shouldn't feel afraid to offend them. Like just the same as try to be open-minded if they don't really want to see you, like seek someone else that maybe is a better fit. So.
Well, ladies, it seems like, we had some experience going to therapy and probably learned a lot. Do you mind sharing like 2 to 3 tools you have gained through those sessions, or any aha moments that you remember?
I feel like therapy taught me how to have self-compassion, how to view the world with a lens of awe and gratitude rather than this like filter of just like, what is even the point? What is the point of what I'm doing? What is the point of anything? Why does anything matter? And I think that level of like mindfulness and gratitude has truly led to this more wholehearted way of living. And it's like a life that is just so much more worth living. So 2 major techniques that I learned in therapy were through CBT and DBT. And I'm sure, those who have gone to therapy probably have heard of CBT before, which stands for cognitive behavioral therapy. That is the most common, I feel like, form of therapy that is provided for talk therapy. And then DBT is dialectical behavior therapy. With CBT, this kind of encourages you to not have these negative thoughts and emotions. And a lot of times, these thoughts and emotions are acquired through your youth or your childhood. And this is what I've learned through therapy, right? So for example, as a kid, say someone always picked on you, someone always said, ooh, like your teeth are nasty, or like you're ugly. And then you grow up to be this beautiful person. There are times where like you're going to be thinking to yourself, no matter how beautiful you become, you are always going to be ugly, right? And CBT sort of breaks that brain pathway to coming to that conclusion for yourself, because it's not true in so many people's eyes, but it's a true statement in your own. So a few tools that I've taken away from CBT, journaling is a very, very big part of my therapy journey, and I would say success, and something that I've taken away and still use today. And it's important because anytime I have these like negative thoughts or am going down the path of self-destruction, I now write it down, which before I would just say, oh, it's okay, you'll figure it out, it'll go away with time, right? But it doesn't. If anything, it just builds up over time. So by journaling, I have intentionally been writing down like, okay, this is why it's where it originated from, and this is where it's leading to. And then the more you start writing this down, say after a week or a month or so, you look back and you start to notice patterns. And when you see these patterns, you can then identify what is the source of this problem, and is that source even reality, or is it just something that I've made up in my own mind because my brain has sort of like permanently believed this to be the truth, right? So journaling has been a big part of my therapy. Another one is practicing gratitude, which I know sounds so fluffy. Like I remember when I first heard that in therapy, they're like, oh, let's practice gratitude, Helen. I'm like, why? Like, that sounds so woo-woo. But I will say that if you do that in a more intentional way, practice gratitude, you can literally change and alter your view of life. And it can be done at any time, right? You can do it after you wake up, before you go to bed. You can say, what are the things that you are grateful for? And that can just give you such a positive mindset in life. And that is actually more DBT than CBT. So dialectical behavior therapy. Dialectical is a fancy philosophy term that basically says that two truths can happen at the same time, right? So you can say, I am trying my best, but I can also do better, right? Two different truths happening at the same time. You can say, I am having the most shit day ever, but I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head. I'm grateful that I have friends that are checking in on me and taking care of me. So these are ways that you can be like more grateful for things. But that is a specific tool that I took away from DBT, and one that I practice regularly. Yeah. Lastly, last thing, well, not the last thing, but these are the top three, okay? Last thing is leaning into vulnerability. This, I would say, is probably the biggest thing with my therapy that had been a 180 shift from when Helen first started going into therapy, and then when Helen left, because being vulnerable opened me up to not only my therapist, but also to my friends in seeking for help, not only in a professional way, but from friendships as well. And being vulnerable with yourself, I feel like that is the most difficult thing, when you're sort of admitting that something needs to be worked on, right? Throughout therapy, Brene Brown was like a huge part of my journey. We've read so many of her excerpts. We watched a lot of her TED Talks. And there was one TED Talk that she had on shame, where, let me pull out my phone and make sure I'm saying this correctly. So she asked the audience, how many of us view vulnerability as a weakness? And I remember during that period of time, I was like, I was watching behind a screen, but I was like, me, like definitely me. And then she said, how many of you see vulnerability on a TED stage and you see it as courage? And I was like, oh yeah, that is such a courageous thing that you're doing. But there was something in me that was thinking to myself, why is vulnerability a weakness to me? But then I see it as so much courage in other people. And that to me, I was just like, something needs to change here. Something needs to shift here. So that is a part of therapy where, you get shown these things and you sort of like rewire your brain to think a certain way. But vulnerability is definitely something that I feel like I've been learning to practice more of, and have been challenging more of myself in doing. And that's been incredibly helpful. So those 3 things I would say are the tools that I've taken away from therapy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you for sharing the
Yeah.
CBT and the DBT exercises.
I know I get them confused sometimes, but I tried.
Now I know the difference.
Yeah.
Or even more so.
Do either of you also remember if you did like CBT or DBT in your therapy?
Yeah. So, I mean, I like the way you broke it down because I think a big part of what I benefited from in therapy was learning the theory and the way that people look at stuff. Because in Asian households, I think we're taught to be like, what is the science behind this, right? Like, oh, this sounds like you're just like saying words. It doesn't feel like valid or like tested. But CBT and DBT are actual systems that address the way that look at the human mind and how we interpret reality and help you, like when they say rewire, refocus your attention, because your attention is what addresses your mood and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of the tools that I got was just like understanding that, because then I was convinced like, okay, this can be something that works.
Yeah.
And one of the exercises that we did was for me to just become aware of how my thoughts, what were the things that were going on in my head, right? And I think Mel had shared this, that when you journal, you tend to be kind of like kind to yourself, or like you say things, but then that may not necessarily be what automatically comes up in your brain that's like running in your thoughts. So we did exercises where she said, anytime you're feeling like a little off, like emotional, write down that feeling and then track what thoughts are making you feel this way. And then you flip the thought and you say, is this thought like absolutely true? And then you find things that support that it's not always true. And then you flip the thought and then you flip the feeling. It's kind of like one of those, but that was an exercise we did quite a bit for me to become more aware of how I was thinking and if that is impacting my mood. So yeah, I liked the way that you broke it down though. I think one of the more powerful, like it's not really a tool, but a perspective that I gained is that life can be better when you shift the way you think. I think like I went in there, I was like, okay, I know I can be a little depressive. I know I can be a little anxious, but like that's just, maybe that's kind of just how I am. And you're going to give me tools on how to learn to live with that. But doing those exercises of reframing the way you think, you realize, oh, if I do this more often and if this is my norm more, like life can be so much more pleasant and better. So I think that, that tool of that thought tracker was something that helped me. Another tool that helped me, which is not an exercise, but I think just if you have some sort of like past event that really impacted you, and you might not be aware that it did, but through going to different sessions, a therapist helps to identify, hey, this thing that happened in your life, it seems like it's coming up a lot, or I can kind of see how potentially it's affected the way that you see things or react to things. So making an active effort to do sessions where they help you reframe it and there's different like therapeutic methods, but talking through it, walking through it, journaling through it, and helping yourself, like it's kind of painful because you have to relive it, but then you get to reframe, like how reinterpret and maybe like be able to forgive other participants in the thing, be able to forgive yourself and how you like participated in something. And then the third thing, which is very big and important for me, was my therapist is the reason why I picked up and stuck with meditation and actually restarted yoga. I did yoga when I was like in high school and college, but I like fell off of it. And when I started going to a therapist regularly in 2000, I think it was like 17, she tried a couple of times to get me to start meditation. And honestly, I was like, look, I've tried before. I can't, never sticks. And she's like, okay. And more sessions with my, she's like, well, how about yoga? I was like, okay, I guess like I kind of did yoga before. I'll try whatever. And then once she through her prompting, I started yoga and I started doing yoga regularly. And then when I kind of hit another wall, she's like, I think that yoga was how it was helping you. Maybe we can like bring it up a notch. Why don't you try? Let's remember meditation. Maybe we try that again. Yeah. It took a good like 3 or 4 months of her prompting me, but I have her to thank for pushing me into that direction, because sometimes you have to try things 4 to 5 times for them to really, really stick. And that I'm very thankful for, because I think that along with the mind or like thought tracking exercises has really helped me find tools that I truly believe like reset my norm and my basis for how you can like enjoy life. How about you, Mel?
For me, the thing I identified quickly in my therapy sessions is that I actually always asked for homework or action items because I like to actively feel like I'm doing something. Like just talking all the time, I'm just like, what am I gaining? So I think after a few sessions, I'm like, I wanted to just, I guess, increase the progress. So I didn't know the difference. I didn't know the difference between CBT or DPT. So I just went in being like, please, can I walk away with assignments so I know that I'm actually doing something? And so the two things that stood out to me that I took away from is one is kind of like Janet mentioned, like meditation. Like I learned really good coping mechanisms for my anxiety. And anxiety is something I've always had in my life. And it was pretty, I would say like kind of intense. But through a therapy, I was educated on like how meditation can really help you be present because anxiety also comes from you always thinking about the next thing or the future. So meditation for me kind of like helped ground me. And it was hard to start at first, but it is something to this day that I do every morning now. I think before I would do like 10 minutes, 15. Now it's just a 5-minute morning thing. So I learned more about meditation. I also practice gratitude. But at first you're like, this is lame. But then you realize how powerful it could be. Because I think gratitude combined with meditation, it just allows you to be really present in the moment. Again, even though these are all basic things, I feel like I wasn't really informed about like I knew what meditation was, but I didn't know meditation could actually help with my anxiety. Like, you know, I didn't link the two together. So I feel therapy really helped me understand like, here are the things you can do. And this is why you're having anxiety. So that's one. The second thing I think therapy helped me understand was that it like really helped me identify why I felt certain things. In every session, I always take down notes, and I was kind of going through my old notes, and I pulled up some of like the questions my therapist would ask me to reflect on afterwards, and I have some here.
Just pull that out of your crotch.
My crotch. So I think during this time, I really wanted to identify why I was feeling like really low confidence and why I was feeling kind of just unhappy. And she asked me, where in your life did you develop this irrational idea of self-worth? And it's kind of what you talked about. Like, I think sometimes when you believe something so much, and even though it's untrue, in your mind it becomes fact. And so she helped me kind of like walk backwards and like, this is when I started feeling this way. And she also made me think about like, what were situations that reinforce this disbelief? And so just like, these are questions I would never ask myself. So for me, I think of all these sessions as intense journaling prompts that could really help you identify a lot of things that you might be feeling uncertain about. So I feel like I love journaling in general. So I feel like I'm always walking away with like really reflective prompts that I could really just sit on and think about. And usually after each like journaling session or my therapy sessions, I'm just like, aha, like,
You have aha moments.
I do have more aha moments because I feel like sometimes when you're going through life, you don't have someone to really sit you down and like, let's ask you the hard question, Mel. Like, what is this? And so for me, it's just more like, again, I walked away feeling more like I could just like identify my feelings more. So when they're coming up, I could kind of like halt it before it gets too crazy or before I spiral. That combined with like my coping mechanisms from tools of like meditation or just like pausing for the moment and being grateful. So I think those are the biggest things I took away from therapy. And I think another thing, if you guys are going to therapy and you're like wondering like, I'm just talking, what can I do? I think it's okay to ask your therapist, can you please assign me like a worksheet, or like, is there a video I can watch? Brene Brown was something I got recommended her book to read, like her video. So just, I think it's okay to ask for resources. Like it's, you get what you put into it too.
Oh yeah, totally. Going back to what you were saying, like you had a lot of aha moments. I actually didn't.
Really?
I don't feel like I did. And that was it is a long, like maybe different people get what, they get out of therapy in different ways, but I felt like I spent a long time there. But I think it was the process of actually being intentional and being introspective that I never gave myself the time to do. So there was something about therapy where the more that we're sitting there watching this video, I'm like, I can do this like when I'm showering. Like, why am I sitting and paying money for this? And why are we talking about this? Like, this is all simple. It feels like simple things, right?
Yeah.
That you can kind of teach yourself. But the more that I, did therapy, the more I found myself changing. And I think this is also something where I think a lot of people go into therapy and they're like, session 1, that's all I need, right? Just one session and I'm done. But I think a lot of times it will be the case where you just have to stick it through and allow this to happen to you and put in as much as you can, obviously, but just kind of don't expect it to change overnight. It definitely didn't change overnight for me. It was a process.
Yeah.
But then coming out of it, I'm like, oh, these are the things that I'm naturally just thinking, or the way that I'm reframing my thoughts. And it's kind of wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know
How
what it
therapy
is?
works.
I think as you're talking, I realize therapy, the reason why you need to stick with it is because it's kind of like working out. Like sometimes you go in, you're like, great, you lift a dumbbell, you're like, where are my muscles? Like, it's not going to develop overnight, but it becomes habitual changes though.
Yeah.
And I think through these, like watching the videos or talking to your therapist, you start asking yourself these questions. And as you're walking through your day, you're like, oh yeah, you just start identifying slowly.
Yes.
And it slowly changes your mindset and perspective.
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
Very well put. Yeah.
Therapy is not always smooth sailing. I feel like there are challenges and setbacks along the way. Did you ladies face any of those throughout your therapy sessions?
Yeah, I would say I definitely I changed jobs a lot in my 20s and early 30s. So insurance changes totally affected that. I did get to a point though where I had built up enough relationship with a therapist and I thought this is expensive, but I will pay out of pocket. And because I had shared with the therapist my situation where now it's like I'm out of network, she was able to provide a bit of a sliding scale. And I want to share that because I want to encourage people out there, especially I think coming from an Asian background where we already don't look at therapy as a super valid thing to invest time in. And then you put a cost to it and you're like, I don't think it's worth, I feel irresponsible almost paying for this. Maybe don't go out to I took it away from I thought mentally I'll take it away from other things in my budget. My mental health was, I wanted to prioritize it in a way where I thought the reality is if I stop seeing this person, I'm probably not going to go seek out another one in time. So I'm just going to front the bill a little bit more. So I just want to encourage people to think of it that way, that it's a worthwhile thing to put money in.
I think the biggest challenge for me was actually not in therapy. It's just getting to therapy. It's getting there. Altering your schedule, taking that time away from friends or loved ones to go do something for yourself. It just felt selfish. I remember thinking to myself, why is this important? Is this actually, you don't even know if it's going to amount to anything either, right? And you're paying all this money into it. So that was the biggest challenge for me. But now that I think that we are all on the other side, I think we would say that it is worth it, right?
Yes.
To go to therapy and make that time for yourself. It's so, so important.
Because you'll be better for the people in your life.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we've already talked about this a little bit here and there through our stories. But if you had to share, kind of summarize how therapy has helped you, what has changed, how has it impacted the way you look at things, your relationships, what were the most important takeaways that you got from therapy?
I think for me, reflecting on this question, I realize I don't have anxiety as much anymore. And that's the biggest thing I could say as someone that had it really young and literally would have weeks and weeks on end with dealing with anxiety and lack of sleep. I don't have it as much anymore. And I was just how did that shift? I was just whoa, I don't know. There's moments that, of course, and things get really intense, whatever. I'll have moments of oh my God, I'm panicking, but not crazy. So I can say right here, therapy helped me subside my anxiety by so much. I think, again, overall, why is because I have so many great tools now that when I feel things coming up, there are times where moments slip, but I can handle it more now because I'm able to just ground myself with these tools. So yeah, I think overall, I feel overall, if I look at my life now, I'm pretty satisfied because I feel kind of equipped to deal with things or deal with tough moments if I have any.
Yay!
I know.
That makes me so happy for you.
Do you remember that, Helen? I mean, I still get anxiety, but it's not crazy as before.
Yeah. I was actually going to say, I'm as your friend, I see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
would
don't
agree.
see you have you just, overall, I feel you're doing so well in general. Just being,
Yeah, you thriving, girl.
Yeah.
Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you, insurance.
Thanks, insurance. Thanks, better. How about you two?
I think I am a completely different person because of therapy. And I think the biggest difference is that, well, I think people on the outside who know me and are, friends or acquaintances, they're like, oh, Helen, you haven't changed. You are the same person. But I think on the inside, it has been a complete 180-degree shift in how I perceive myself and how I perceive the world. And that's something that people on the outside will not ever understand, what's going on your own brain or like someone else's brain. And so the person that you see on the outside, I think more accurately matches the person that is on the inside. And that is the biggest shift that has happened because of therapy, 100% because of therapy. I think life is just so much more worth living now. And that is just such a big statement to make, like because of therapy. Like that's, I don't know. I just feel like such a more like, I don't know. It just feels more authentic, real. And this is like, this is who I am kind of a thing, you know, which is, it's a good feeling to have. Yeah.
I think that's huge. Yeah. Perspective shift. And I will say, I see it as well. I think because we're closer and we hear, like, we know your kind of background dialogue at times and your perception of things. And I definitely see that. Yeah. And I feel like.
Sorry, like a high five.
High five.
I'm gonna high five you because like we already.
I was just trying not to move my head as much.
I feel like very similar to both Helen and Mel. I would say those are both things I've taken away. I feel like I have tools to now better combat situations that usually would throw me into a deeper state of depression or anxiety. And also just my overall, like the way that I look at life and the way I look at myself is so much more positive. And I think another level for me is like, I just feel more aware. Like I know myself better, and it wasn't just learning about myself, but I think I feel like I've been educated a bit about like general human psychology from learning like CBT and DBT and things like that. Just understanding how people are, why I am the way that I am in certain ways, not because I'm like there's something wrong with me, but because I'm a human person, and this is how psychology works. This is how life experiences impact the way you are, and I also feel like it helps me relate to other people a lot better. I feel like I can look at people and I can spot maybe certain things where I'm like, oh, I think I know where you're coming from. I understand. And then it helps me like, yeah, be able to relate to people better. So those are all things that I feel like have been really beneficial.
I would agree with that a lot. Yeah. Do you think that you would continue with therapy?
Yeah. Right now, I am seeing my therapist once a month just for kind of like a maintenance check-in. And because I'm, trying to work through a couple of different transitions. But I can see myself maybe in a month or two or a couple months, maybe not being able to take a break. And then I might come back to her at a later time or seek another therapist. But yeah, I will say I go through different periods. When I feel like I need to talk to someone or something's not quite right, I will reach out and do a couple sessions.
For me, I actually I took 2 years off, and I recently just started therapy, literally just like last week again. As much as I'm pretty confident in my like toolkit that I have, I just have this like inner gut feeling that part of me feels as if there's a next Mel that I need to evolve into. And a lot of emotions I just kind of want to unlock more and just build a stronger backbone for things. Maybe it's probably because I'm in a relationship, and even though it's been almost a year and a half now, almost 2 years, that I feel that there's still a lot for me that I can learn to be a better partner and a stronger communicator. So I think that's another reason why I want to rejoin therapy. So I'll see how it goes. The one I have right now, she seems great. But yeah, right now I think I'm gonna enter a new chapter that I just want extra assistance and help in identifying.
Personally for me, I am not going to therapy right now, but I agree that I've had so much just benefit from therapy that I know that if I ever were to need it, that it's there for me. So that is sort of my stance on it. And I think, again, just to reiterate for anyone out there who is seeking or wanting to seek therapy, like take those steps to do it. I would say to just do it now, like today, like after this episode. Just start taking those steps to do it now, because it is so, so important. And like we mentioned, it can literally rewire your brain to think differently if you are, always in a state of like gloom or something, or state of something that you're not completely satisfied with yourself. So check out therapy. I wish it was sponsored, because we've been talking about it so much.
I know.
We do have a partnership with BetterHelp, like a code if people want to use.
That is true. Check it out in our caption.
Yeah, definitely check it out. And we want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to us share our stories. We hope that some of it was relatable, some of it was helpful. We hope that what we shared can help you out there feel a little bit less alone if you feel like you saw yourself in some of our stories. And if there are other topics within, I guess, like mental health or therapy that you want us to chat about, leave them in the comments. So we have some topics that we can cover.
And with that, we'll catch you on the next episode.
Bye.